Alright, welcome to my channel, The K.A.E. So we're at the Strataca Underground Belt Salt Museum here in Kansas. So you can see my buddy's car, he's running in. So I'll be running in there too. And we'll see if I can get in and film the tour. So I'll see you. So we're going to check the underground salt mine. So we'll see you soon. Okay, take a look here.
Welcome. You are now 600 feet underground. Sorry, this is like my first time doing a without the script. So, permits. 275 million years ago, geologists told us that there was a sea here. And diagram that is all over it, sorry. There is 80 feet of salt below and 40 above us. And you guys are just go ahead and water through. So I'll just be there to help you with the gallery, okay?
Alright, so right now we're 650 feet below the salt mine, so it did come through a dark elevator while we got the synopsis. So I'm taking you now on the journey to see all the things here. So I'll just kind of walk around and try to show all the signs. You can still go on the site and check this out, but right now we are below. So here it is. So it was bad. Well, water trapped in the rock. So there's that information. Salt facts. So you can check out everything right there. Okay. And then where all the salt deposits are right there, so you can see. And then you can go on the other side and you can check. There's a map right here and just all the information about, salt and geology and what this. So it's a little interactive. It is a long walk across, so yeah. So eventually we're going to keep making our way over. So right now we're just checking these things out. So I'm going to take the kind of the lead here. Okay, and here's some of the samples. So of course don't be touching any of this stuff right here. Okay, so yep, so welcome from the Permian playground. And then here's the mud and everything. Okay, there's donations. Anyone want to throw some donations? Yep. So you could blow up the donations. But don't blow up the donations there. And you got all kinds of things, salt secrets. So look at the footage. So let's see, I'm gonna kind of feel the wall here. Mo, are you gonna lick the salt? They said don't lick or touch the salt. But Mo says he's gonna go for a sodium if he needs it. And there's some more salt secrets all over. So there you go. So we're right here. And of course we're at Airport Road here. So there's more down there to see. So right now you just have a lot of information right now. Creatures of the Permian, some of the things are extinct based on information and the fossils. All right, when we go down further, I will show you more stuff. So hang out and stay tuned. All right, now I'm here at the gallery. So we walked a little further. So then finally we can look at some cool stuff here. So you got the little salt trains here. Of course you can't go in and sit in there. So you take a look right here. So they carry salt, right? So there's actually some few things to look at now. Some items instead of descriptions. So let's see, I got more descriptions. You can look at a few things here.
I think it's just the equipment.
So this is the equipment, yep. So I'll at least show you some of the equipment. All right, so we're gonna, and we could go look at the cars and everything. So right now this is the gallery area, so I decided to bypass a lot of the things. So here we go. All right, so here's the old school rides. So you take the ride in the car, and there's all those parts there. So I'm just at least show you some equipment they use. The salt harvester, this is what this is. So these are some of the harvesters and products. There's still more to see, as you can see. And you can sit down and watch the history of the video if you're, into all that. So I'm just trying to get as much items to show you. Some interesting items. So here we go. So there's the salt. So there's the cores. And you can still watch a film on the miner's life and all that. So yeah. So you could press play and they'll play the video for you, but I don't want to I'll let some of you just come to Kansas and watch that. So, but you can actually watch that, all of that. And by the way, if you're coming down here, everyone's wearing a hard hat for safety reasons. And here's all the stuff. So that's a requirement for all the gear that we're wearing. So actually, yeah. So I have the gear. All right. So I'm gonna keep walking, checking some more things. Other gallery here before we take like some tours. So I'm kind of going ahead and going after it. So there's where you can store the salt or explosives actually. And here like the movie costumes. So we got some of the areas. So over there's the train. So yeah, and there's some of the movie costumes. So the lady was talking about what was being stored underneath. All right, so let's see what's going on here. I think this is pretty interesting. So we got the joy loader right here. The Eco model efficiency. So from the Eastern Iron Metal Company. So there's the equipment that's on display right there. So look how it is all situated. Of course, look how big the wheel is. Yeah, it says, please do not climb. So it's amazing. So yeah, so that's pretty cool. So yeah. So we're just checking some more things out here. So we could go towards the train. All right. So at least this is most of the gallery. All right, so we're gonna go to another section in a second here. So just follow along. I'll see you in a second. Okay, so now we're entering the secured area, but here's the thing. These are things from the movie sets. So you can see from some of the movies, Angela Jolie, Salt, Kevin James, Zookeeper, and then you have Men in Black. So you have all the items from Men in Black. There you go. So that's pretty cool.
That one was actually warm though.
Yeah, it's actually warm. Here's the Giant. So you have a lot of the movie sets here. Some of the things from the movies. Yep. And most from the motion pictures. Send it to the salt mine. Yep. Wizard of Oz. Yeah, so there's some things stored here. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And here's all the Wonka chocolate bars. So, and of course, here's the animation. And you could do a lot of things. Natalie Cook's racing suit. This is Cameron Diaz's jumpsuit, in Charlie's Angels. And you got Charlie's Angels, and you have Superman. Yep, Daily Planet, the miniature Daily Planet. So let's see. Let me see if there's other things. Oh, look at this, Twister. Do you guys remember that movie Twister? And here's the cool part. Let me just show you. So they use yeah, and they called it Dorothy. If you guys ever seen the movie Twister, with who is it? Who's the actresses? Oh yeah, Helen Hunt and Bill Paxton. And if you look at all this stuff they stored. They stored a lot of underground stuff here with the movie reels as a lady. So these are records, so I can't be touching any of them. As much as I like to take one out and look. So it has all the records in there. So it's pretty neat. And then we got the gift shop. So, yep, and you even have the Matrix. And you got all the NASCAR stuff too. Yep. So Jean Girard and Talladega Nights. And you got Mr. Freeze on Schwarzenegger. So there's Mr. Freeze, Batman and Robin, and you got the Batman costume here. So it's pretty cool. All right, so yeah. So you can thank all these companies. Oh, and forgot a couple more movies. Spider-Man and White House Down. All right, so that's what you got. So, all right, we'll go on a train tour and some other things. We'll see what comes next, and I'll see you soon. Follow through. Okay, we're now on a little salt mine train here. So I gotta be careful and make sure the gimbal does not get knocked off, because if you're really tall, you could hit your head on the salt. And plus these things are sharp, so you gotta be careful. So we're going on a little journey, so I'm holding on to something, and here we go. So we are going on this little run, so just get to see a few things.
In the wall to your right is a bulkhead. A bulkhead is what the miners call a wall that was used to direct airflow. This bulkhead is made of 1.5-inch thick tongue and groove planks supported by 6-inch by 6-inch timbers and sealed with black tar paper on the backside to keep air from that part of the mine from coming into this side. It was slowly being crushed by the roof, but as you can see, it finally came down. On the platform are a couple of two-thumbed gloves. In the 1940s, when this area was being mined, everyone conserved materials for the war effort. The miners would wear the gloves until they wore out the palms. Then they would wear them on the opposite hands, using the second set of thumbs until they wore out the backs of the gloves. Now, stories have been told that Mr. K.A.E., the owner of the K.A.E. salt mine, was always after the miners to pick up their trash and not contaminate the salt. Well, apparently a miner rolled up these gloves and stuffed them in a blasting hole, because that's where we found them 60 years later when we opened this part of the museum. Now, if you look closely at the salt wall to the right, it appears there's another glove stuffed in a blasting hole.
All right, here we go. I'm gonna make about 4 more stops. So let's take a little train ride. All right, so I'll get to the next stop there.
On the floor used to be the roof, but over a number of years, the salt started sagging away from the compacted mud layer above it and eventually fell. Now, even though only a few rooms ever develop a roof sag, everywhere in the mine that people will walk, drive, or ride, we monitor the roof, and sags are removed when necessary. Can you imagine how it must have sounded when this roof fell?
All right, so here we go.
1923 to 1983, the miners used a rail system to transport salt from the mine face to the salt skip, where it was hoisted topside. Then, in 1983, they switched to a conveyor belt system. On the left is a car that was used to haul salt and railroad tracks that were abandoned when mining left this area in the 1950s. The miners would use the same rails and ties over and over, since bringing more down the skip was both time-consuming and costly. Our train crew ripped up and hauled back abandoned rails and ties from the mine that were used for our train track. Almost 5,000 feet of rail for the track you're riding on. At the next curve, we'll pass by other original cars used with the rail system, including a hand-wheel-operated rail bending car. Everything that comes down in the mine stays in the mine. And if you look at the lit area, you'll see that this is even true of mining trash. Now, we know this area was mined in the 1940s and used as a break area in the 1950s. And we found many name brand products in this trash pile from that time period, and some of which are still around today. There are a couple of things that we noticed here. One, there's a calendar from 1953 on the floor by the rocks on the left. And two, when we found it over by the pillar, the gray trash can, well, it was empty. We consider all these items to be artifacts, which only proves one person's trash is another's treasure. In case you were wondering, trash isn't the only thing miners left underground. And apparently this area was used as a restroom. Oh, no fancy porta pots here. And they weren't very careful with the toilet paper either. And this is one reason we say, don't lick the salt. As we round the curve up ahead, two spotlights will come on. The first, on the left, will highlight a stack of empty cardboard dynamite boxes. Then on the right, you'll see a pillar that is scaling or spalling. This means that the salt is breaking away from the wall. And like roof sags and floor heaves, this is a natural occurrence in a salt mine. And as your ride continues, keep in mind, we've tried to leave the mine just as it was years ago. Now, when we get to the station, please remain seated when we stop and do not get off the train until instructed to do so.
There's your story about not licking the salt. All right, we're almost ending this train tour. you on the next tour. To be continued. See you soon. Okay, we're on the dark ride tour, and the man will take us around and give us the tour, so follow along.
Which would provide power. And the second reason is because we wound up on springs, and once it started going down the rails, it would bounce up and down uncontrollably, and it wasn't a very smooth ride. Now after that, we have some road cards with CSC stamped on them. That stands for the K.A.E Salt Company. Each road card could hold up to about 4 tons of salt, and was handled by 2 miners known as muckers. It would usually take them about an hour and a half to fill up a minecart. Then once they did, they would receive 1 brass chip. At the end of the day, they would take that brass chip up the top side and receive 50 cents each for them. Not a lot by today's standards, but during the Great Depression, that was a pretty good paying wage, especially when a miner can earn upwards to $4 a day. The last card on your left is the powder cart, which the miners use to haul around their dynamite and other explosives throughout the mine. As you may notice, it's completely made out of wood. The reason being is we didn't want any electricity or sparks flying on it, and setting off the dynamite or explosives out there hauling in within it. They use water boxes from 1923 up to 1950.
So it's be a little bumpy because we're on an uneven road.
They eventually converted from dynamite to what they use today, known as ANFO, which stands for ammonium nitrate, which is just a mixture of fertilizer and diesel fuel. Now that we made our way to the actual dark part of our dark ride today, you'll see an example of what we call broken pillar mining. The reason for this technique of mining is because it helped with air ventilation within the mine, and it was a lot easier for the equipment to go around a 40-foot pillar versus a 300-foot wall similar to the ones you saw at the beginning of the museum today. As we slowly go forward, if you want to look over to your right, you'll see the rib walls. Each rib was caused by a blast from a miner, and then each blast will take about 8 feet off the wall. Miners can blast up to about 5 walls per shift, up to 10 walls on a double shift. And if you ever want to know how many blasts it took to get to a certain part of the mine, you just want to count the ribs. Now as you slowly move forward and you look up at the ceiling, you notice that part of it looks different from the other. That's why the reason being is because it was mined out with a machine called a continuous miner, which is used by underground vaults and storage to mine out those parts of the ceiling to make the ceiling more secure. So in areas with a ceiling like that, you don't have to wear your hard hat because the biggest thing that can fall from there is about pebble size. And if you look forward, we have an Avenue G sign up ahead of us. That's just to show where we are relative to the top side. You have to turn off Avenue G to get into our museum parking lot today. So that's just where we're at, 650 feet underground right now. Soon the light to the right's going to be popping on, and at the top of the salt pillar is going to be a pure crystallized salt deposit. So geologists estimate that this area is about 275 million years old, and during what we call the Permian period. During that period, there was wet times and there was dry times. During the wet times, the salt water, the mud, and silt would all mix together and form a strata, and the salt water would also like to go down the cracks of that strata and pour up at the bottom and form a brine pool. And then during the dry times, that brine pool would evaporate, leaving behind nothing but salt. We're going to be coming back around that area here in a little bit to get a better look at that salt deposit there. There's 3 different companies down here in the salt mine today. We have Strataca, Hutchison Salt Company, and we have Underground Vaults and Storage. Underground Vaults and Storage likes to use this area because of the consistent temperature and humidity. It's also a lot safer down here because it's really hard to break 650 feet worth of earth to come down here and steal something. It also preserves items a lot better. As you will see when you go through our underground vaults and storage area later, we actually have a newspaper printed back in 1865, the day after Lincoln was assassinated, and it's been preserved well enough where you're actually still able to read it. Now as we're stopped right here, can anyone in the back tell me the 2 most important things to a miner?
Air. Hard hat.
Air is one of them. Hard hat isn't pretty important, but the other thing that's the most important is light. Air and light are the 2 most important things to a miner. So when the miners were down here, they'd work in a buddy system. They'd also carry their carbide lanterns with them, which is equivalently a Zippo lighter today. Now hopefully those miners remember to bring their spare lanterns with them, because if their buddy were to go to a different part of the mine and their lantern were to go out, this is what they would see. Or what they wouldn't really see. This is what we call mine darkness. Now this isn't complete mine darkness due to the fact that we still have a few sources of light bouncing around here today, but it's pretty darn close. If you put your hand in front of your face, you wouldn't really be able to see it. And if you listen real close, you can hear the motor of the fan that's bringing in air from the top side all the way down here into the mine today. I'm gonna go ahead and flip the light back on. We'll continue on with our tour. As we slowly move forward, the light's going to be coming on to your left. If you want to check it out, what we have over there is a gob wall. Gob walls were used to redirect air to certain parts of the mine and keep it from coming to other parts of the mine. This particular gob wall is made up out of empty dynamite boxes that was filled up with salt. Each box can hold up to about 70 to 80 pounds worth of salt. This wall was built about 2 boxes back and 10 boxes high. And that little table you see over to the left there was what we assume they used to help fill up those boxes with salt. Now, since they were filling up those boxes with salt, they weren't filling up the ore carts. And of course, if they weren't filling up the ore carts, they weren't getting paid. So these gob walls were actually built for free at the time. As we slowly move forward, we're going to be going over a slight hill. And once we do, I want you to pay attention to the ceiling once again, because you'll see a deposit of red salt. So when the salt mine first opened up back in the 1920s, farmers like to purchase salt from the K.A.E salt company to give to their cattle, so the cows can lick on the salt. But the cows weren't a fan of the red salt because it was extra bitter. So since the cows didn't like the red salt, the farmers didn't buy the red salt. And since the farmers didn't buy the red salt, the miners never minded. So that particular deposit of red salt we have over there, we don't know how big it is exactly, because the miners never minded. Now we're going to be taking a left turn over here to get a better view of that pure crystallized salt deposit that we saw earlier. As we slowly pass by it, if you want to take a really close look at it, you'll notice a hint of red in it. That's because that's coming from that red salt deposit that we just passed under. As I said, we don't know how big exactly that deposit is, but we know it's big enough that it's affected this area over here. And if you look at the bottom, you can see that mud, silt, the strata layer that we're talking about that settles towards the bottom. Now to stop over here on your left, if you want to take a look at the picture on the back right corner, you'll see the first iteration of a gob wall. The miners originally used the salt to make these gob walls. Well, the salt didn't do a very good job of keeping the air from going into certain parts of the mine, so that's when they started using those dynamite boxes. And if you look over to the left, we have another one of those dynamite box gob walls that's fallen over. And behind it is what the miners started using after those dynamite boxes. That's what we call a Brattis curtain. The Brattis curtains were a lot easier and a lot quicker to put up. So that way the miners can start using the salt to fill up ore carts again, so that way they can start getting paid again. The original Brattis curtains were made out of wool or jute at the time. Later on in our tour, we'll be able to see a more modern version of those Brattis curtains. And then towards the front here, we have a very non-OSHA approved fan. This fan was put on skids so the miners can move it to different parts of the mine. And that way it can also help with the air ventilation as well. It's also a good example of what comes in the mine, stays in the mine. And there's a little bit of a burnout there. So when the humidity gets a cut on it, what does it want to do? It wants to close that hole back up. So since we punched a hole in Mother Nature to get to the salt, she's trying to close herself back up. And this is what's happening over here. This is what we call a floor key. So the salt pillar on your right is pushing down on a bed of rock we call anhydrite. And as it's pushing down on that anhydrite, it's pushing everything up, and that's what's causing this floor key. The comparison is if you were to stick your finger in a pot of Play-Doh, what happens? It starts pushing up and going over the sides. If you look over that 9-foot ruler we have over there, it shows that that floor key is going about 2.5 to 3 feet high. This picture over on your right just shows off another roof fall that you folks saw on your train ride today. Just goes to show how big these roof falls can actually get. As the gentleman on the left side of the picture is standing within that roof fall. The gentleman on the right, however, is standing next to what we call a roof sag. That's where the salt would separate from the mud layer above it. And if the miners were to come across the roof sag, they would use a tool that was on the left side of that picture known as the scaling bar. It's just a fiberglass handle with a crowbar on the end of it to pull those roof sags down to avoid having them come to the falls later on down the road, possibly injuring any miners or other personnel on the mine that day. There's 3 different salt companies here in Hutch today. We have Hutchison Salt Company still, which Still used in this mine to this day. All salt that comes out of here is used for road salt and road salt only. And the biggest buyer of that road salt is actually the city of Chicago. The other two companies is Cargill Salt and Morton Salt. They get their salt through what we call the evaporation method. That's where they drill a hole in the ground, fill it with salt water, and then wait for all that salt to pull up at the bottom. And once it does that, they suck all that water and salt back up, evaporate the water to get it and other impurities out of it. And that's actually how you get your table salt. Over on your right is another great example of what comes in the mine stays in the mine. So after 1983, when they converted from the rail bed system to the conveyor belt system, the miners started using trucks and other forms of machinery to haul the salt around the mine. So what they would do to get this equipment down here is they would take it apart up topside, put it in a hoist similar to the one you rode in today. The only difference between the two is the one they used was only half the size of the one you came in. And of course, once they got all the pieces down underground, they would start putting it back together, use the items so they couldn't be used anymore, and then once they got to the end of their life cycle, they'd push to a corner somewhere in the mine, and then they would just leave it. And that's what happened to this truck over here. The reason why they did that is because it would be too expensive to take it all apart, send it back up topside, and get it fixed up. So they just left it down here. This is actually a 1932 Chevrolet pickup, and as some of you might notice, it's missing a few things. It's missing the doors, the windows, and most importantly, the motor. The reason why they left the doors and windows up topside is because there's no weather down here in the mine, so they didn't have to worry about that. And the reason why they left the motor up there is because this truck was actually converted to use an electric battery. The reason why they did that is because they didn't want to burn any fossil fuels down here and put carbon monoxide in the mine and have to worry about carbon monoxide poisoning. So if you look at that electric battery on the right over there, there's a cable running on the right side of it, all the way to the bed of the truck. This is the extension cord that they use to power it. It runs about 300 feet long. And miners like to play games and place bets on this particular truck. What they would do is they would get the truck going as fast as possible, and then they would unplug it and see how far it would coast. Currently, the record's about 150 feet, and the only reason why we know that is because eventually somebody had to push that truck back. It was usually the loser of the bet or a new miner getting picked on for the day.
It was a lot of fun.
And all the other big pieces of machinery that you saw in our gallery today was actually converted to use a biodiesel, which was essentially kind of a soybean oil. Now, in 1958, the Atomic Energy Commission made their way to the Hutchison salt mine because they heard how mines would close in on themselves. So they thought they didn't want to use the mine to dump their radioactive and atomic waste. So that way the mine would swallow it back up, and that way they don't have to worry about it anymore. You know, have a side out of mine. So they decided to perform a few tests down here in this mine. The tests were originally supposed to last only 2 years. But we all know how government plans go, nothing goes right off the get-go. So instead of being here for 2 years, they were actually here for 9 years. During that 9 years of testing, they were using some equipment to find out the mine closure rate, which is just how fast the mine is closing in on itself. Soon over to our right, the light's going to go on and show off those rules. So after the 9 years of testing, the Atomic Energy Commission found out that this particular mine is closing 1 inch every 500 years. So we have plenty of time before we close today. And after all that testing, they were pretty happy with the results. They decided that, yeah, they were going to use the mine to dispose of their atomic and radioactive waste. So they made their way over to the Lion Salt Mine. Well, the people of Lion weren't too happy about that because they were worried that the radioactive and atomic waste would pollute the waterbed. So they started forming protests and filing lawsuits against the Atomic Energy Commission. And after some time and numerous lost lawsuits, the Atomic Energy Commission eventually packed up and went down to New Mexico, where they happened to find a mine that was running a lot deeper and was closing up a lot faster. So if you folks ever want to go see some aliens and get some stars at the same time, New Mexico's the place to go. A man by the name of Ben Blanchard made his way to the area we now know as South Hutchison today because he was trying to sell some real estate. Well, the land wasn't selling too well, so he decided to use that land to dig for oil. Well, come to his surprise, he didn't find any oil, but what he did find was salt. That's what caused the salt boom at the time, which brought about 10 companies over the Hutchison salt mine. But of course, as we said earlier, only 3 of those salt companies remain today. Now, as we're slowly moving forward, we'll be coming up on our salt rock pile where you'll be able to take home a piece of salt rock home with you. They will ask you not to climb on the salt rock pile because I don't want you to slip, fall, and hurt yourself. We do offer free bags for you to fill up with salt. Or if you happen to find a piece of salt that's no bigger than the palm of your hand, you can take If we're not all loaded up on the tram ready to go, when the light goes off, I'll just have everyone freeze up, and I'll get that line turned back on for us.
Can you take Angelo some salt?
Now that we've come to a complete stop, you may safely exit to your right.
All right. So the tour is continuing. Now we get to get off. And we can take some salt with us if we like. So here's some of the salt.
All right, guys, get yourself some good ones.
So I'm gonna pack this into my luggage. Going back. We'll get one for Jonathan.
I'll get one for him.
I'll take it to him.
You want to take that one?
I don't want a big. No, it's too. Gotta go beyond my 45 pounds. So as we're looking. So the cool thing, you can get yourself a few souvenirs. So wow, some salt rocks. So a few souvenirs you guys can take with you as we're still on this tour here. Oh, these dudes.
So one of our employees who's been here for 10 years, who's working here on our equipment, he's down at the pump. He said he didn't really feel here.
All right, so we're gonna continue the tour. I picked up some salt rocks here and see. Continue the tour, and here we go.
Moving on water for just a couple seconds. After that, you're going to want to dry it off with a paper towel. And after that, you're going to want to set it out for about 24 hours just to make sure that it completely dries.
We're headed to the underground
And
graves.
after that, you're going to go ahead and form a clear lacquer on it to help preserve it. You want to avoid using any kind
So
of
my buddies are here.
Put it on there, it'll turn salt yellow and won't look as good. You also don't want to put the salt on any kind of wood or leather furniture because it'll suck the moisture right out of it. And there's some pretty nasty white stains that you won't be able to get out. You also want to avoid putting the salt in your flower bed because it'll look real pretty for a little while, but after that next big rain like we had last night, it'll dissolve and kill everything in that flower bed. And also you want to avoid putting it in your fish tank because as it being pure salt, it will dissolve and your fish won't be able to acclimate to it. You won't know what floaters anymore. Some of you may know Hutchison is known as the Salt City. Our high school mascot is the Salt Hawks. Our cheerleading star is the Salt Shakers. And our drill team is known as the Frying Birds. We also have our water park that's open up during the summer called the Salt City Splash. So yeah, we really like to celebrate salt around here. Down here in the summer, we like to do all kinds of movements from 5K runs to 10K runs. Bicycle tours. But as of right now, that's our example. We're going to take a left turn over here. As we slowly pass this soft hill on your right, if you want to look over to your right, you'll see a modern version of those lattice curtains I was talking about earlier. Over by that light, you'll see those big yellow curtains. Those ones are actually made out of reinforced vinyl. And some of you may be thinking what we have to keep from the rest of the line. Well, that's actually our event center. We like to host all kinds of events in there, from birthday parties to weddings, concerts, even an occasional business meeting. The best thing about being 650 feet underground is there's no cell phone reception, so you're not going to get any pesky phone calls interrupting your super important business meeting. We also have a Boy Scouts down here who will stay overnight during their mining and geology baptism. We also like to host a dinner theater party down here called Murder in the Mine.
There you go.
All our events are canceled right now, but just keep paying attention to our Facebook page and our website. We'll start posting when those events start going live again. Now we are getting close to the close of our dark ride today. We appreciate once you take it home today, go to our Facebook page, Google business page. Leave us a review and tell us about your time here in the line today.
If you want to get married, you should do it down here.
Yeah.
And once the kids are stop, our gift shop will be to your left. And our
It'll be fun if you guys want to do ceremonies or get married, like my friend says.
Instead of throwing rice, you can throw salt on it.
Yeah, we can all pelt each other with salt. That's how this can end. As I put the background music to drain out what we said. All right, this ends our tour, so see you in a minute. All right, everyone, that ends my tour today. So I was 650 feet below. So Margarita and Mo, and we are now headed to our next location. So if any of you enjoyed any of this content, please hit the like, subscribe, and hit the bell for future icons. And as I go outside, we are freezing like crazy right now. Yeah, so it's supposed to be a snowstorm here coming to Kansas. So I'm gonna get back in the car unless I'm gonna meet the Wizard of Oz here. All right, I'll see you. Take care. Be safe.